Still wearing cheap suits, Cabello? That was the first thing Yewande said when I walked into the reunion. Not hello. Not how have you been. Not even the fake politeness people use when they want to insult you without looking cruel in public. Just that. Still wearing cheap suits, Cabello? A few people near her laughed, not because it was funny, because that is what people do when they can sense blood in the water and don't want to be the one standing too far from the circle. I looked down at my jacket for half a second. Dark charcoal, clean lines, no flashy label stitched on the outside, no loud watch, no desperate attempt to impress anybody in that room. Then I looked back up at her. 9 years. 9 years since she walked out of our apartment in Soweto with 2 suitcases, a gold necklace I had bought on layaway, and the kind of expression that tells a man she had already left him in her heart long before her feet reached the door. And somehow, after all that time, the first thing she reached for was my dignity. The reunion was being held in one of those polished hotels in Santon, where the air smells like money, polished wood, and expensive perfume. Gold lights floated above us. Glasses clinked. Old classmates wore their success like armor. Some wore it honestly. Some rented it for the night. Yewande belonged to the second group. She was beautiful. I will not lie to you. She had always known how to walk into a room like she was the answer to a question nobody else was smart enough to understand. Deep wine-colored dress, hair done perfectly, smile sharp enough to cut cloth. And on her arm stood a tall man in a navy suit, with the kind of smile rich men practice in mirrors before business lunches. His name, I would learn later that night, was Lunga. At that moment, he just looked at me the way people inspect old furniture at an estate sale. Yewande tilted her head. What happened, Cabello? I thought by now you'd at least learn how to dress like the life you used to brag about. More laughter. I heard a soft, wow, from somewhere behind me. The kind of wow that doesn't mean admiration. The kind that means even the witnesses were surprised she said it out loud. I should tell you something right here before we go any further. 2 days before that reunion, I signed the final documents on a deal that pushed my net worth past 1 billion. Not rand, dollars. By the time Yewande was laughing at me in that ballroom, I had already spent the morning on a video call with attorneys in Nairobi, investors in Dubai, and a logistics team in Accra, finalizing the expansion of a clean transport and infrastructure company I had built from the ground up after she left me. She did not know that. Most of the room did not know that. And the truth is, I did not come there to tell them. My name is Cabello Dlamini. I am 43 years old. I was raised by a school secretary and a father who repaired electrical panels until arthritis turned his fingers into stiff little prayers he could no longer close. I know what it means to work until your back speaks a language your mouth never will. I know what it means to love somebody who only notices your effort when it fails. And I know what it means to rebuild so quietly that people confuse your silence for smallness. Yewande took a sip from her glass and looked me up and down again. So, she said, loud enough for half the room, did you come alone, or are you still inventing a better life in your head? There it was, that old knife. Back when we were married, she had a way of asking a question that was really a sentence that carried its own conclusion before you even answered. It was never curiosity. It was ceremony. She liked humiliation the way some people like candles at dinner. To her, it made the moment complete. I'm not alone, I said. She laughed immediately. Really? So where is she? My wife is on her way. That made the group around her light up all over again. One woman in silver earrings covered her mouth. Oh, now there's a wife too? Yewande threw her head back and smiled toward the crowd like she had just been handed better material than she expected. Your wife? She repeated. Cabello, please. The last real thing you ever had left 9 years ago. I let that one pass. There are insults you answer, and then there are insults you study. The second kind usually tells you more about the speaker than they ever meant to reveal. Lunga had been quiet until then, but I noticed something strange. He was not laughing the way the others were. He kept glancing at my wrist, then my shoes, Then my face, like a man trying to solve a problem that did not belong at a reunion. Not fear, recognition. But from where I did not yet know. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to take you back 48 hours earlier, because that is where the real story begins. It was Thursday afternoon in Johannesburg, and rain was hanging over the city without fully committing. I was sitting in the back of my car outside our Rosebank office, reviewing numbers on a tablet, when Nia called me. Nia had been my friend since secondary school, the kind of friend who tells you the truth before she tells you what you want to hear. She now ran governance for a national healthcare nonprofit and still spoke to me like we were 16. "You're going," she said before I could even say hello. "To what?" "The reunion." "No." "Yes." I smiled into the phone. "That sounds very democratic." "Cabello, you've avoided every one of these people for almost a decade." "I did not avoid them. I simply had better things to do." "Like healing in private?" I leaned back and looked through the tinted window at the city passing by. Delivery bikes, a man selling phone chargers in traffic. 2 office workers under one umbrella walking like the rain owed them an apology. "I have no unfinished business there," I told her. "That is exactly how unfinished business speaks." I said nothing. She softened her tone. "Listen to me. I'm not asking you to go there and perform. I'm not asking you to prove anything. I'm asking you to walk into a room that once held a version of you and leave it without carrying him back home." I rubbed my thumb against the edge of the tablet case. That was Nia's gift. She knew how to reach the part of a person that had already decided, but was still pretending not to. "I'll think about it," I said. "You'll go," she replied. "And you'll wear something simple, nothing flashy. Let the truth wear itself." Then she hung up. That evening, my wife Zahara found me in the kitchen, staring at the invitation on my phone like it was a legal threat. Zahara laughed softly. "Only a reunion can make a billionaire look nervous." She was leaning against the counter in one of my old university shirts, her hair wrapped loosely, one foot crossed over the other. No makeup, no performance, just that dangerous kind of beauty that does not need permission to exist. "You know I hate when you use that word in the house," I said. "What word?" "Billionaire." "Why?" "Because it makes me sound like a cartoon villain who owns islands." She walked over and slipped both arms around my waist. "You do not own islands," she said. "You just own ports, warehouses, energy corridors, and enough companies to make normal people tired." I kissed her forehead. "I am serious." "So am I," she said. "You are also still the man who apologizes to chairs when he bumps into them. That helps." I showed her the invite. She read it and looked back up at me. "Are you going?" "I don't know." "Do you want to?" I thought about the question carefully, because with Zahara, honesty had become a habit I could no longer survive without. "Part of me does," I admitted. "Not for them, maybe for me." "Then go." "It might be messy," she smiled. "Cabello, I work with ministers, founders, donors, and ego addicts. I promise you, I understand messy." I hesitated. "Yewande will be there." "I assumed so." "She may make a scene." "She might." I searched her face for even a trace of insecurity. There was none. Zahara just squeezed my hand. "Then let her. Anybody who needs a crowd to help them feel taller is already standing on weak ground." I laughed under my breath. "You always sound like you swallowed a book of wise sayings." "And you sound like a man who still underestimates what peace has done to his face." I looked at her for a long moment. "Will you come with me?" She nodded. "I have a board dinner for the scholarship network that evening, but I'll meet you there right after." That should have been enough to settle me, but when I went to bed that night, I did not sleep easily. Because there are some rooms your body remembers before your mind does, and Yewande was one of those rooms. Back when we were married, we lived in a small apartment with cracked paint near Orlando West. I was doing electrical subcontracting during the day and taking night classes in systems management because I believed, with all the foolish faith of a young husband, that if I just worked hard enough, life would eventually bow its head and become fair. Yewande was brilliant, beautiful, ambitious, the kind of woman professors remembered and shop assistants disliked for reasons they could never explain politely. She had dreams bigger than our street, bigger than our block, maybe bigger than our whole city. I admired that in her. What I did not understand then was that admiration and suitability are not the same thing. The first time I noticed something had shifted between us was a rainy Wednesday after she got turned down for a fellowship she wanted badly. I had spent 2 extra weekends wiring a commercial bakery in Midrand to cover the application travel costs for her interviews. She came home angry, kicked off her heels, read the rejection email in silence, and then looked at me like I had personally written it. "This life is too small," she said. I thought she meant the apartment. I said, "Not forever." She laughed once, not kindly. "No, Cabello, I mean with you. You never forget the first moment somebody turns your love into a location they want to escape. I did what many men do when they love too hard and think too little about themselves. I worked more. When the rent rose, I worked Saturdays. When her sister needed money for a crisis, I worked Sundays. When Yewande wanted to enroll in an executive short program she said would change everything, I sold my father's old backup tool set without telling anybody and paid the deposit. She never asked where the money came from, and I never volunteered it. Because I still believed then that sacrifice was something love naturally respected. It isn't. Not always. Sometimes sacrifice only teaches the wrong person how much of you they can spend without reimbursement. The reunion was on Saturday night. By 6:30, I was standing in front of the mirror in our bedroom, adjusting my cuffs, while Zahara sat at the vanity fastening earrings. Simple black dress, emerald stones at her ears, soft perfume. The kind of elegance that does not announce itself because it expects to be noticed anyway. She looked at me in the mirror. "You're overthinking." "How can you tell?" "You have your serious face on." "I always have my serious face on." "No," she said. "Tonight you have your old serious face on." That landed deeper than she probably intended. My old serious face. The one I wore back when I thought manhood meant carrying embarrassment quietly so other people could remain comfortable. I turned to her. "What if going there stirs up things I buried for a reason?" She stood, walked toward me, and fixed my tie with patient fingers. "Then you will discover whether they are buried or merely waiting." "And if they are waiting?" "Then tonight will teach you something useful." I smiled. "You make emotional danger sound like a seminar." "Everything becomes a seminar if you survive it properly." I kissed her, slow, grateful. At the hotel, the reunion had already gathered its rhythm by the time I arrived. Men comparing watches, women embracing each other with one arm and suspicion. A DJ blending old house tracks with jazz instrumentals. Former athletes carrying themselves like retired governments. Former class clowns now speaking about real estate in borrowed accents. I signed my name, took a glass of sparkling water, and stood near the back for a while watching the room remember itself. Then Yewande saw me. And once she saw me, she came toward me the way fire recognizes dry grass. That is how we arrived back at the moment I started with. "Still wearing cheap suits, Cabello?" After I told her my wife was on the way, she smiled in that polished, dangerous way I knew too well. "Your wife," she repeated. "What is her name?" "Zahara." "And what does she do?" I almost laughed. Not because the question was funny, because of how impossible the answer would sound in her mouth 5 minutes from then. "She runs an education and girls' innovation network across East and Southern Africa," I said calmly. A few people near us exchanged looks. Yewande blinked. Then she recovered. "Of course she does." There was a cruelty in that sentence I recognized immediately. It was designed to say, "Nobody believes you, but let us all enjoy your little fantasy." Lunga finally spoke. "So what about you, Cabello?" he asked. "Still doing contracts here and there?" His voice was smooth, casual, too casual. I looked at him. "I build logistics and infrastructure systems." "Small firm?" "No." He gave a short smile. "Fair enough." But he kept watching me. That watch on my wrist again, my shoes, my face. Then, for one split second, it happened. His eyes widened, just slightly. The way a man reacts when a quiet detail suddenly rearranges an entire picture in his mind. He had seen something. Not enough to act, but enough to worry. Yewande missed it. She was too busy turning my presence into theater. "You know," she said to the group around her, "Cabello always talked big. Even in school, he was always building some grand future in his head." I said nothing. She stepped closer. "But some people never leave where they started." That line drew murmurs. The room was listening now, not because I mattered to them, because humiliation is entertainment when it wears formal clothes. Yewande lowered her voice just enough to make people lean in. "Tell me something honestly, Cabello. Did you ever become anything close to the man you promised me you would be?" The younger version of me would have answered, would have defended, would have listed, would have begged reality to be admitted as evidence in a courtroom run by the wrong judge. But the older version of me had learned something expensive. Some questions are not asked for truth. They are asked for blood. And if you answer them, you are donating. So I simply said, "I became exactly who life required." Her smile flickered, not because she understood what I meant, because she knew the line did not break me. There are people who can handle your poverty. There are people who can handle your pain. But the one thing they cannot handle is when the version of you they thought would always ache suddenly no longer needs them to feel important. Yewande took another sip. "What a poetic answer," she said. "You always did know how to hide failure behind calm words." At that exact moment, Nia appeared at my side. Perfect timing. Deep blue jumpsuit, sharp eyes, no patience. She looked from Yewande to me and said, "Am I interrupting or rescuing?" Ayanda's smile thinned. "Nia, still dramatic." Nia ignored her. "Cabello, you all right?" "I'm fine." "Good, because this conversation smells like expired insecurity." One man choked on his drink. Ayanda's jaw tightened. "You always did like taking his side." "No," Nia said. "I always liked the truth. It just often stood closer to him than to you." That should have ended it. But public humiliation is a greedy machine. Once it starts, it wants one more moment, one more witness, one more round. Yewande turned back to me and said the sentence that shifted the whole night. "If your wife is real, then let's see her." It was childish, cruel, perfect for a crowd. Someone actually laughed and clapped once. I checked the time on my phone. Zahara was 15 minutes late. Her board dinner had run over, which was normal. She was the kind of woman who stayed until the work was actually done, not until the cameras got enough photos. "I said she's on her way," I replied. Yewande lifted one eyebrow. "Convenient." Then she looked toward the group and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps we should all wait for the mysterious Mrs. Delamini." That got a bigger laugh than anything else. I remember feeling something strange then. Not anger. Not embarrassment either. More like distance. Like I was watching a woman perform certainty on a stage built from old information. Because what she did not understand was this. I had not spent the last 9 years hoping for a moment like that. I had spent the last 9 years becoming the kind of man who no longer required it. Still, memory is a dangerous photographer. It captures old versions of you and flashes them at the worst times. As the crowd smiled and waited for me to crack, I remembered another night. Durban, 9.5 years earlier. Yewande had been invited to a networking dinner during the period when everything in our marriage felt like a test I had not been informed about beforehand. I drove 4 hours after finishing a site job because her car had broken down, and she said she needed me. I arrived soaked from rain, tired, still in work clothes under my jacket. She came out of the venue, looked at me, and instead of thank you, she said, "Could you not have tried to look less embarrassing?" I laughed softly then, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. On the drive back, she spoke for 40 minutes about the men at the event. How polished they were, how informed, how connected, how they carried themselves. She never said I was beneath them. She did not have to. Comparison is one of the cheapest forms of insult because it allows the speaker to remain technically innocent while leaving the victim fully wounded. By the time we parked, I sat in the dark with both hands on the wheel long after the engine stopped, trying to convince myself love was still enough to translate humiliation into endurance. It wasn't. It never had been. Back in the ballroom, Yewande was still smiling when the doors near the main entrance opened and the temperature of the room changed. I did not even turn immediately. You can always tell when a truly powerful person enters because the room reacts before you do. Conversations paused. A waiter slowed down. 3 heads turned in sequence. Then Nia smiled. I looked. Zahara had arrived. She wore a deep emerald gown with clean lines, not loud but impossible to ignore. Her hair fell over one shoulder in soft waves. She carried no visible anxiety, no hurry, no need to claim attention because attention had already chosen her. She walked through that hotel ballroom like she belonged equally in boardrooms, classrooms, embassies, and prayer halls. And what struck me most in that moment was not how stunning she looked. It was how peaceful I suddenly felt. Because some arrivals do not create drama, they end it. Yewande turned too. I watched her face change. Confusion first, then calculation. Then the first thin crack of uncertainty. A woman near the bar whispered, "Is that Zahara Okonkwo Dlamini?" Another answered, "The education founder?" A third voice said, "The one from the Innovation Network?" Zahara came straight to me, smiled with warmth that belonged only to us, touched my arm, and kissed my cheek. "I'm sorry, my love," she said. The trustees would not stop talking. A few people went visibly still. Yewande stared. "This is my wife, Zahara," I said. Zahara nodded politely toward the group. "Good evening." She did not oversell it, did not perform status, did not punish anybody with extra elegance. She just existed, and that was punishment enough for people who had built their confidence around denying her reality. Yewande forced a laugh. "Oh, well, this is surprising." Zahara smiled, but only slightly. "Truth often is." I nearly laughed at that. Lunga had gone very quiet, and now I understood why. He knew my name. Not from Yewande, from business. He took a step closer, studying me openly this time. "You're Cabello Dlamini," he said slowly. "I've been that for a while." He swallowed. "You're with Dlamini Axis Group?" "Yes." Silence. A very interesting silence, because once he said the company name out loud, the room began doing private arithmetic. One man near the windows frowned like he had heard it before on the news. Another person took out a phone. Yewande looked from his face to mine and realized something terrible. There was information in the room she did not control. "What is Dlamini Axis Group?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Lunga did not answer quickly enough, so Nia did. "Only one of the fastest-growing clean logistics and infrastructure networks on the continent," she said. "Warehousing, transport corridors, port tech, renewable delivery systems, capital partnerships. Ring a bell?" Yewande's face drained by degrees. I did not help her. I had spent too many years helping her process realities she had earned the hard way. Zahara placed a gentle hand over mine and said to no one in particular, "Cabello just closed a major expansion. We're proud of him." Again, not a boast, just fact. But facts sound loud when they walk into a room full of gossip. Yewande looked at me as if trying to find the old version of me under the jacket. "When did this happen?" she asked. "Not all at once," I said. "That's usually how real things are built." She said nothing, and for the first time that night, the crowd stopped laughing. If the story ended there, that would have been enough for most people. Public mockery reversed, secret wife revealed, hidden success uncovered. But that was only the first door. The second opened when Amina stepped in. Amina had been 1 year below us in school. Quiet, brilliant, impossible to fool. She now worked in forensic compliance and procurement integrity for a regional infrastructure oversight body, which is a long and official way of saying she made dishonest men sweat through their shirts. She had been standing across the room for a while, watching. When she approached, even Lunga noticed. "Yewande," Amina said calmly, "you should stop." Yewande looked at her sharply. "Excuse me? You should stop talking before this evening gets worse." Lunga's posture changed immediately, not outwardly, but enough for me to see it. That is another thing work teaches you. On construction sites, in negotiations, in marriages, under pressure, people reveal themselves in centimeters before they reveal themselves in sentences. Yewande laughed too hard. "Why would it get worse?" Amina folded her arms. "Because mockery is easier to maintain when nobody in the room knows anything." A hush moved through the circle. Yewande glanced at me, then back at Amina. "What exactly is that supposed to mean?" "It means," Amina said, "that while you were busy announcing who Cabello failed to become, some of us actually know who he has been." Yewande's smile was gone now. Completely. Amina turned slightly so the room could hear her. "For the last 7 years, the full Science and Innovation Scholarship program at our old school has been funded quietly through a private giving structure attached to Cabello's foundation network." Murmurs. Real ones this time. I closed my eyes briefly. I had never wanted that announced. Not because I was ashamed of it, because the work mattered more to me without my name hanging over it like branding. Amina continued. "The robotics labs, the girls' coding fellowship, the math support bursaries, the teacher equipment grants, all of that. Him." The noise in the room changed shape. No longer amusement, recognition, surprise, and the most dangerous one of all for people like Yewande, revision. Because once a room begins revising its opinion of you in real time, the people who spoke most confidently before it happened start looking for exits. Yewande stared at me. "You funded the school?" I said nothing for a second. Then, "The children needed it." "Why would you not tell anyone?" "Because I wasn't doing it for applause." That line landed. Hard. Not because it was cruel, because it accidentally described too much about too many people in that room. Yewande looked embarrassed for the first time. Not ashamed yet, just displaced. Like somebody who walked onto the wrong stage but kept acting anyway. Then Amina turned to Lunga. "And you," she said, "should be careful tonight." His voice tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means I know your name from somewhere other than this room." Now everybody was listening. Lunga forced a smile. "I'm in infrastructure advisory. That could mean anything." Amina nodded slowly. "It could. Or it could mean the flagged subcontractor network tied to a municipal storage corridor bid 18 months ago." Dead silence. Yewande looked at him. "What is she talking about?" Lunga did not answer. Amina's voice remained level. "The deal did not go through because the internal review team at Delamini Axis identified irregular shell routing before any transfer was completed." Yewande turned fully toward him now. "Lunga?" He looked annoyed now more than nervous, which told me almost everything I needed to know about the kind of man he was. Those allegations went nowhere, he said. They went nowhere, Amina replied, because they were stopped before public escalation. That is not the same as innocence. The room pulled back without moving. Nobody likes being too close to scandal when it finally gets its own name. Yewande's eyes searched his face for reassurance. He offered none. I watched the moment a woman realizes the man she chose for status has left her emotionally uninsured. That is a brutal thing to witness, even when the woman once broke you. Especially then. Tell me she's lying, Yewande said quietly. Lunga exhaled through his nose, like the conversation itself was inconveniencing him. This is not the place. Which, translated into plain language, means, I cannot deny this cleanly enough in front of witnesses. Yewande's voice sharpened. Tell me. He looked at her and said the coldest thing a man can say without raising his volume. I said this is not the place. That was when she finally understood she was alone. Not socially, spiritually. There is a difference. You can be in a ballroom full of former classmates, expensive glasses and sympathetic stares, and still feel the floor disappear beneath you because the one person you leaned on was only ever leaning on your usefulness. Yewande turned back to me. Her eyes were bright now, not with tears yet, but with the kind that comes seconds before. You knew? She asked. I answered honestly. I knew enough. And you said nothing? My team handled what needed handling. That's not what I mean. Of course it wasn't. What she meant was something older, something deeper, something that had been waiting 9 years for a microphone. She swallowed. Did you know about us before the divorce? The room did not just go quiet then. It tightened. Zahara's fingers rested lightly against mine, but she did not intervene. She knew some truths need to arrive in their own footsteps. Yes, I said. Yewande stared at me as if I had physically struck her. You knew? I knew. For how long? Long enough. She took a shaky breath. And you stayed? This is the part people often misunderstand about men who endure too much. They think staying means weakness. Sometimes it does. But sometimes it means hope wearing itself into self-harm, so slowly the person inside it cannot hear the damage being done until years later. Yes, I said. I stayed. Why? I looked at her. Really looked at her. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just truth. Because I thought if I kept building, kept carrying, kept giving, one day you would choose me without being forced to. I thought love, properly demonstrated, would become impossible to ignore. Yewande's face broke a little then. Not fully, but enough. And when did you stop thinking that? When I realized I was asking a person to value what she had already trained herself not to see. No one moved. No one interrupted. Some stories earn silence, not because they are dramatic, but because they expose something people fear in themselves. Yewande whispered, "Why didn't you confront me?" I could have answered a dozen ways. Because I was tired. Because I was ashamed. Because I believed dignity meant enduring more than it does. Because men are often taught to confuse pain tolerance with emotional maturity. But the truest answer was simpler. Because by the time I had proof, I said, the marriage was already gone. I was just the last one still acting in it. That line hurt her. I saw it, and I did not enjoy it. That is important. People think revenge tastes sweet. In real life, most of the time it tastes like old metal and finished grief. Yewande turned to Lunga again. You told me everything with us would be different, she said. You told me I would never have to struggle like that again. Lunga looked embarrassed now that the room had fully turned. I gave you opportunities, he said. She laughed then, but it was a broken sound. Opportunities? He shrugged lightly. You made your own choices, Yewande. That was it. That was the final cruelty. Not the mockery, not the affair, not even the scandal. The final cruelty was watching a man reduce intimacy to a transaction the second witnesses became inconvenient. Yewande took one step back from him, then another. I watched her shoulders lose their shape. The crowd had started pretending not to stare, which is somehow worse than staring directly. A few people drifted away in the way people always do when the entertainment becomes too real and starts asking moral questions of the audience. Nia leaned close to me and murmured, "You can leave now if you want." I nodded, but I wasn't quite ready. Not because I wanted more, because a strange peace was descending over me, and I wanted to understand it before I moved. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like if Yewande ever truly saw me. Not the struggling husband, not the man in work boots, not the person she could measure against rooms full of polished strangers. Me, the builder, the provider, the mind, the discipline, the quiet. I used to think if that day came, it would feel like victory. But standing there in that ballroom, with Zahara beside me, Amina silent now, Lunga unraveling under his own cowardice, and Yewande finally staring at the truth like it had arrived too late to save her, I felt almost nothing triumphant at all. Only release. That is how healing often enters, not as fireworks, as weight leaving. Yewande looked at Zahara then, and in her face I saw the sharp, private pain of comparison reversed. She had spent years measuring me against men who looked expensive. Now life had measured her against a woman who was not trying to compete at all. Zahara met her gaze with calm, not cruelty. There was mercy in that. The kind mercy strong people can afford. Yewande wiped beneath one eye quickly and said to me, "You really built all of that?" I answered with the honesty she had always hated because it did not chase her approval. "Yes." She nodded once, like the truth had become too large for speech. Then she asked the one question I did not expect. "Were you ever going to tell me?" I thought about it. About the years, the paperwork, the airports, the deadlines, the warehouses in Tema, the electric freight pilot outside Mombasa, the education labs, the women-led engineering scholarship program Zahara and I launched in 3 cities, the endless, quiet, disciplined mornings. "No," I said. She flinched. "Why not?" "Because that version of my life was never yours. There are sentences a room remembers. That was one of them. Not because it was dramatic, because it was final. A person can survive being insulted. A person can survive being ignored. What many people cannot survive is clarity. Clarity closes doors. Clarity removes negotiation from the air. Clarity says, "This chapter is finished, whether you respect that or not." Yewande lowered her eyes. The old me might have softened then, might have rushed to comfort the same person who wounded him, might have tried to rescue her from the consequences of her own choices, so I could continue auditioning for goodness in front of God and strangers. But growth does not always look kind on the outside. Sometimes growth looks like refusing to interrupt the lesson. Zahara squeezed my hand once. That was enough. I turned to her and said quietly, "Shall we go?" She smiled. "Yes." As we began to walk, Yewande said my name. Not loudly, not theatrically, just once. "Cabello." I stopped, but I did not turn fully. She asked, "Did you ever hate me?" I stood there with one hand in Zahara's and the whole night behind me, like a building I no longer lived in. Then I answered with the cleanest truth I had. "No," I said. "I hated who I became while trying to keep you." If the room had been silent before, now it was sacred. Because everybody knew that sentence was not just about marriage. It was about self-betrayal, about shrinking, about all the ways people carve themselves down so they can fit inside love that was never built to hold them. We left the ballroom. No dramatic exit music, no backward glance. Just polished floors, cool night air, and the sound of a chapter finally unlatching behind me. Outside, Sandton was glowing. Traffic slid by in ribbons of red and white. A valet called out to another driver. Somewhere across the road, somebody laughed from a restaurant terrace, completely unaware that several lives had just rearranged themselves inside a hotel ballroom 30 meters away. I opened the car door for Zahara, and she paused before getting in. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm listening." "To what?" "To how light my chest feels." She smiled softly and got in. For the first few minutes of the drive home, neither of us spoke. We passed lit towers, late-night diners, taxis, street vendors packing up, and a city doing what cities do best, refusing to stop just because your private earthquake has finally found its ending. Then Zahara said, "I need to ask you something." "All right." "Did tonight hurt?" I kept my eyes on the road. "Yes," I said, "but not in the way I expected." "In what way, then?" "In the way old scars ache when rain reminds them they exist." She nodded. "That sounds honest." "It is." We drove a little farther. Then I said, "There's something I never told you." She waited. "There was a notebook." "A notebook?" "Yes." "What kind of notebook?" "The kind a man keeps when he doesn't fully trust his own memory yet." I told her about it then. How during the final year of my marriage, after too many humiliations spoken casually, and too many moments where Yewande denied the weight of her own words, I began writing them down. Dates, places, exact sentences. Not for revenge, not for court, for sanity. So that when I started to wonder whether I was too sensitive, too emotional, too weak, too proud, too difficult, too anything, I could open those pages and remember that confusion is often the first home abuse rents before it buys the whole neighborhood. Zahara listened without interruption. When I finished, she said, "Do you still have it?" "Yes." "At home?" "In the bottom drawer of the study." She looked out the window at the city lights. "Will you keep it?" "I don't know." "Do you still need it?" That question stayed between us for several seconds. Then I answered, "Not after tonight." When we got home, the house felt different. Same walls, same art, same long hallway with the runner Zahara insisted brought warmth into the space. But I walked through it like a man returning from a trial whose verdict had been obvious all along, yet still changed him to hear it spoken aloud. Zahara went to make tea. I stood alone in the study for a moment, looking at the bottom drawer. The notebook was there. Blue cover, bent edge, cheap paper, heavy history. I held it in my hands and felt how small it was compared to everything it once controlled. A whole season of my life reduced to pages and ink. I did not open it. That was new. For years, every time doubt came, I reached for those pages, the way some people reach for old voicemails, unpaid debts, or photographs of funerals they think they need in order to remember what hurt. But healing changes your relationship with evidence. Once you truly know what happened, proof becomes less necessary. Zahara entered carrying 2 mugs. She saw the notebook and said nothing at first. Then, "You don't owe that version of yourself another night." I sat down. Neither of us drank immediately. I looked at the notebook, then at her, then back at the notebook. "You know what the strangest part is?" I said. "What?" "If you had asked me years ago what winning would look like, I would have described tonight all wrong. I would have said it would be her apologizing in public, or the room admiring me, or her regretting everything where everyone could see. And now? Now I think winning looks like not needing any of that. Zahara smiled over her mug. That is because you are finally rich in the place that matters. I laughed softly. You always talk like this? Only when tea is involved. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I stared at it, already knowing. Yewande. The message was short. I'm sorry. For tonight, for before, for more than I know how to say. I read it once, then placed the phone face down. Zahara did not ask whether I would respond. She just looked at me. I shook my head. Not tonight, I said. Maybe not ever. That is also allowed. We sat in silence after that. Not empty silence, earned silence. The kind only peaceful people know how to share without turning it into work. The next morning I woke earlier than usual, just after sunrise. The city was pale and cool, washed in that soft gray light that makes even expensive neighborhoods feel briefly honest. I took my coffee to the balcony and stood there, looking out over the trees, the roads, the waking rooftops, and the faint movement of commuters beginning another ordinary day. Ordinary. That word meant more to me than it used to. When you have spent enough years proving, enduring, carrying, bleeding quietly, ordinary becomes one of the most luxurious things in the world. Zahara joined me a few minutes later in one of my sweaters, hair undone, still half in sleep. She leaned against my shoulder. Any regrets? About going? Yes, I thought carefully. No. Any sadness?
Yes. She nodded like that made perfect sense. It should, she said. Why? Because freedom and grief often leave the same room together. I looked at her. That sounds like another seminar. It's a good one. We both smiled. After a while, she asked, if she had valued you properly back then, would your life still have become this? There are questions that flatter, and there are questions that force you to admit grace entered through a wound you would never choose again. I answered slowly. Maybe not like this. She did not speak. I continued. I think I always had the discipline. I always had the hunger. I always had the mind. But pain gave me direction. Not because pain is noble, it isn't. But because one day I got tired of being available for disrespect. And when that happened, all the energy I used to spend trying to be enough for the wrong person finally became available for building. Zahara took a sip of coffee. That sounds true. It is. I looked out over the city again. For years, I had thought manhood was about how much insult you could absorb without reacting. Then I thought it was about how much money you could make without sleeping. Then I thought maybe it was about how much responsibility you could carry without asking for rest. But standing there beside the woman who had never once asked me to shrink for her comfort, I understood something clearer. Manhood, at least the kind I respect now, is not built from tolerance for pain. It is built from self-respect organized over time. It is built from refusing to finance your own humiliation. It is built from choosing peace before applause, discipline before image, and integrity before audience. Around 9, Nia called. Well, she said the second I answered. Well, what? Do I get thanked for forcing you into emotional growth, or do I invoice you? I laughed properly for the first time in 2 days. You were right. I know. It was necessary. I know that too. I leaned on the balcony rail. She mocked me. I expected that. Zahara arrived. I was hoping. Amina exposed Lunga. There was a pause. Oh, it was that kind of reunion? Yes. Good Lord. I told her the main points, and at the end she went quiet. Then she said something I will probably remember for the rest of my life.
You know why last night mattered? Why? Because the room finally met the man pain could not stop. But more importantly, so did you. After we ended the call, I stayed outside a little longer thinking about that sentence. The man pain could not stop. Not the man pain never touched. That is fantasy. No, I was touched by it, changed by it, disciplined by it, humbled by it, but not stopped. And that distinction, I think, is where many people lose years of their lives. They assume being hurt means being defeated. It doesn't. Sometimes it just means construction is happening where nobody can yet see the scaffolding. Later that afternoon, I took the notebook from the drawer again. This time, I walked to the outdoor fire pit at the back of the house. No ceremony, no speech, no dramatic soundtrack in my head. Just sunlight, soft wind, and pages that had already completed their assignment. I tore out a few first, not in anger, just to make sure my hands understood what my heart had already decided. Then I fed the pages to the flame. They curled fast, blackened at the edges, and lifted into heat. The words that once made me question my worth disappeared into smoke without asking permission. I watched until the last page softened and fell inward. And I felt nothing theatrical. Just done. That evening, I sat in my study and thought about how strange life is. 9 years earlier, I was a tired husband trying to turn loyalty into destiny. Now, I was a man with more wealth than I had ever imagined, yes, but more importantly, with enough inner order to know that the money had never been the real victory. The real victory was this. Yewande no longer had the power to narrate me, not in my absence, not in public, not even in memory. And once a person loses the right to narrate your identity, they lose almost everything that ever made them dangerous to you. If you are listening to me right now and you have ever been laughed at, overlooked, betrayed, compared, used, or made to feel like your worth was still pending approval, hear me carefully. Do not rush to answer every insult. Do not waste your best years making presentations out of your pain for people who have already decided not to understand you. Do not confuse being chosen with being valued. And please, do not build your entire future in the courtroom of somebody else's ego. Build quietly. Build steadily. Build so well that even your peace becomes evidence. Because one day, if you stay with yourself long enough, life will bring you into a room that once held your humiliation. And when it does, your greatest victory will not be making everybody gasp. It will be discovering you no longer need them to. If this story spoke to you, comment "Quiet wins" below so I know you stayed to the end. And tell me this too. If someone from your past tried to measure your worth using an old version of you, would you explain yourself? Or would you let your life answer for you? Subscribe for more powerful stories of betrayal, truth, healing, and silent comeback. And remember this, the strongest glow-up is not becoming richer where they can see it. It is becoming whole where they can never touch it again.